Instability and ongoing violence hurting the country's oil infrastructure and slowly but surely putting a dent in its output. John Jafar is joining me now to discuss this in the studio. And we're looking at what is the deadliest period since 2008 in Iraq and the surge then. What's this lack of security? What sort of impact is it having on what is its precious resource, oil?
Well, it's very interesting when you look at the reports there from Arwa. You would suggest that this is all around Baghdad and then has some flashpoints, but it is spilling into production. Two different reasons. Number one is because once you have that breakout, the oil companies themselves, how long can you leave your executives in when you have that sort of sectarian violence? And does it really feed into the bottom line in terms of production? Now, the difference between May and June is quite startling. Let's take a look at what we're talking about here. This is the monthly production, right? 76.9 million barrels for the month of May. This is from the Ministry of Energy at Iraq. And in June, 69.8. So they basically lost a month's worth of revenue for the entire year, if you stretch that out over the year, in that difference of the 700 million of production here that is going to go away. So it's 7 million barrels just right there in the month, and oil's trading about $100 a barrel. So there was great hope here because the year before they surpassed Iran for the first time since the 1980s at
3.4
million barrels a day, and in June they got down to 2.9 million barrels a day. So it is filtering right into the place.
Is it all about a lack of security, or is it more complex, do you think, than that?
So I think it's far more complex than that because the security just added to a very uncertain environment. A couple of big hurdles that we have there right now is how to divide the revenues right now. So let's go to the revenues. In May, there were $7.4 billion, and because I said they had that drop in production, 6.7, they don't know how to divide the production between the national government and the Kurdish region. Now there's questions raised in Basra, and even the oil producers. This is like the United Nations of producers. They all wanted to get in because the future is so strong, and we'll get into what they're suggesting in terms of renegotiations. But there's suggestions that Iraq could pass Saudi Arabia in the next 8 to 10 years in terms of both reserves and production. Let's take a listen.
I, for one, think that once it's fully explored, they could even be higher than Saudi Arabia, number one. So the issue is how to develop those reserves, and that's where the challenge lies, because there are infrastructure issues around export terminals, pipelines, there are some security issues in other parts of the country, but the big challenge is policy.
So he finishes on the idea of policy, and that goes back to the national oil law. This has been on the table for 4 to 5 years. They can't reach agreement with different parts of the country right now. The revenue share with Kurdistan and the central government of Baghdad. Iraq has a pipeline that goes into the Kurdish region right now. Baghdad's not happy about that. He talks about the comparison between Saudi Arabia and Iraq. That was during my visit in March to the northern region. Look at this, Becky. This is interesting. He's suggesting that they haven't discovered all the oil in the ground right now. Proven reserves for Iraq as of 2012, 141 billion barrels, and Saudi Arabia, 265. There's some that believe by 2025, this number could see Iraq topping Saudi Arabia. They've even put in this idea. Yes, and they've even put this on the table that they wanted to get to a crazy number of 20 million barrels a day of production by 2025. Now they've lowered that to 12. At the start of the year, they've lowered it to 9. So they're not meeting the expectations or the potential, and that's where the security equation comes in.
Yeah, this is something we'll talk about, I know, in the weeks ahead. One assumes this security situation is not going to improve overnight. I mean, conspiracy theorists, of course, will say that the war in Iraq was all about oil. I mean, the international companies, of course, went in and tried to carve up the sort of assets and things. How did the international oiling community actually work out in the end, so far as its assets are concerned, just out of interest?
Well, it's interesting, yeah, because it's almost like the United Nations. The Italians are in there, the Brits are in there, the Dutch are in there, the Americans are in there, the Chinese and the Russians. But something that has held back the production, Nouri al-Maliki, as the prime minister, wanted to go to a service contract, which means that the oil majors get paid per barrel between $1 and $2, maximum $5. They're trying to renegotiate that right now because in the north, they went with a different model, and that's the international model. That is a production sharing agreement where you get a percentage of the field, you get the upside potential if you beat your production targets. So one would suggest that this model is not working, to be very candid right now, for Iraq. They set up these very lofty goals, but the appetite for risk by the oil majors to go in and stay in, if you're not going to get that much payback, is not there.